English 102 teaches the skills essential for understanding poetry and other texts beyond the surface. In Unit 1, I enjoyed learning about the poems The Fish and other readings from authors like Myrdal and Jordan. The poem Many Rivers to Cross by June Jordan explains the struggle African American women faced back in the day, this case in particular. It's about an African American woman whose mother had killed herself and she had no food or money. She had a child and a husband. She had no money, so she couldn't afford school and her apartment for herself. She wanted to have her life turned around a few months before September so she could get her child into school. Her husband no longer wanted to be with her. He married another man's woman and went off to graduate school in Chicago and left her behind. She was not for the divorce, but he wanted out. She lived in the projects, which is dangerous in itself, but during the summer would stay with her family to make money. Most of the poems we have read, especially in the beginning of the semester, have been related to oppression of African Americans or oppression of some specific group, whether that be related to race or religion. I also enjoyed working on descriptive outlines and learning how to properly write a précis or summary about specific readings, as well as learning about how certain ethnic groups face discrimination, as well as learning of making meaning of these texts. I enjoyed making meanings of the text we read, and we learned a lot about reading in our Digging into Literature book that allowed us how to interpret texts. Breaking surface meaning became easier as Unit 1 went along, and it made it easier to jump into Unit 2 and other units that followed. It taught us to branch off specific words that make other words in the text make more sense to give us a better understanding of what we're reading. So in conclusion, Unit 1 opened doors to the meaning of text and how to interpret what it is trying to tell you. After Unit 1, it made it easier to summarize and put together short paragraphs that say and mean a lot even when the text says so little.
What You Pawn, I Will Redeem is a very eye-opening story for readers. To get things going, Jackson Jackson, an alcoholic Native American living in poverty, said he married 2 or 3 times, had 2 or 3 kids, and then went crazy, like he didn't even know his own life. He then found his grandmother's regalia in a pawn shop and wanted to get it back, but it cost $999, and he was given only 1 day to muster up the money. Along his journey, Jackson showed some weaknesses in his life. He was given his first $20 to start from the pawnbroker, and he instantly bought 3 bottles of liquor, and him and 2 friends finished them off. Alcoholism can really take a toll on the body as well as the bank account. One of his friends left him, and the others passed out because of the alcohol. After he sold some newspapers, Jackson bought 4 cheeseburgers and could not hold them down, even stating that he has trouble holding anything down. The alcohol really messed up his body to where he couldn't eat anything. He does show that he had good intentions after winning $100 on a scratch-off and then giving $20 to the cashier, telling her he loved her. But the alcohol abuse once again took over when he blew the rest of his winnings on shots at the bar for him and some other Indians. Once again, he was nice to buy shots, but ended up in a tough situation after having 12 of them by the end of the night. At 2 a.m., he got in a fight with the bartender because he wouldn't leave, and he forgot what happened afterwards. Come 6 a.m., a good police officer found him lying on the train tracks and even gave him $30 to use, even though he knew he might use it on alcohol. He used it to buy breakfast for himself and some other poor Aleuts that live in the area. Here's another case of him showing his natural native kindness, but also blowing his money right away because he can't help himself. For homeless, smart decisions can be tough to make because of how desperate they are, and bad habits like alcoholism can lead them down an even worse path, as shown by the story. By the end, the pawnbroker winds up giving him the regalia for $5 because he felt bad for him and he knew he worked to get more money. This could be a situation where a good thing is happening to a good person. Jackson wanted the best for everyone else. He just had a drinking problem where he couldn't keep himself under control. This selection can teach everyone a lesson on the dangers of alcoholism, as well as the possible perks of helping out neighbors. Later in the chapter, Christos and Luis Erdrich express their frustration with the way Indians have been treated. The whole white community does not understand Native American culture, and they have just taken advantage of them ever since coming to America. John Wayne says, quote, "We've got them where we want them, drunk, running," end quote, in Dear John Wayne, which further shows vulnerability of the Native Americans, especially when drunk. Native Americans have been disadvantaged for centuries, and they have resorted to alcoholism, which is never the right answer because everything negative can happen because of drinking too often. They can, however, serve as positive examples when it comes to treating others with utmost respect, which is the most important thing that can be taken from Unit 2. Treat with respect.
In Unit 3, we took a look at the yellow wallpaper. This story is shocking, frustrating, and confusing at first until you look into the context. At first, it appears that the woman in the story is being neglected by her husband and even other people around her. It seemed so obvious to us that she was suffering from postpartum depression or possibly even postpartum psychosis. Why wasn't anyone giving her the help that she needed? Her husband was a physician, so surely he should know better, right? Well, once we took a look at the context for the story, the character's behavior made a lot more sense. The two essays we read, one by Kellogg and one by Mitchell, showed us that there was little to no knowledge about mental health during the time period that this story takes place in. The woman's husband was actually providing what he believed to be the best care possible during this time. This is the perfect example of how context can provide a much deeper meaning to text or just any situation in general for that matter.
In Unit 4, we researched the text that we were writing about. Executive Order 9066 is a poem about the Japanese internment camps of 1942, where Japanese Americans were held for up to 3 years in the camps. The Executive Order 9066 writes about a young girl who writes a letter to the government, talking about the racism, propaganda, and life-altering move that our government forces against her. Black Boys Play the Classics is about racism in the 20th century and passed down racism through generations. A young white boy who hasn't been taught the practice of racism yet enjoys the music of the young black musicians that he listens to. He's ecstatic by it. The young white boy hadn't been taught the generational and systematic racism that all the white men who pass by in the train station and ignore the black boy's music. Looking deeper into historical reasons and meanings in our text helps us understand the struggles and reasons behind what our characters are doing. Researching deepens a reader's understanding of the story's message, time period, and location.